Brandon here for Comic Conversation, and we're having a celebration because Marvels, apostrophe on the first Marvels. The series Marvels is celebrating its 25th anniversary, created by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross in 1994. Marvels was released 25 years old, and we are celebrating. And how are we celebrating? Marvels is releasing variant covers that pay tribute to the original series. They have Marvels Annotated, which has editor's notes and Easter eggs all being revealed for the first time. So if you're a first-time reader, kudos to you. Pick that up. You get to see all of everything. It's like a DVD extra. No one has DVDs anymore. Blu-ray extras. And Marvel is releasing Marvel's Epilogue. That's what I'm talking about. Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross reunited for something a little special, a little ending. That's coming out soon. Super excited. We're going to look back on this episode of Comic Conversations so we can see why what was written then is still so important now. Spoilers ahead. Marvels follows a news photographer, Phil Sheldon, and we get to follow Phil Sheldon over the course of his career. His career as we see it starting in 1939, and that is when everything changes for Phil, because he's, just a young hot shot, figures himself a bit immortal, just chasing news stories, trying to make a life for himself. He's got a lady on his side that he's ready to put a ring on and maybe live in that American Pie life with a white picket fence around a nice house in Queens. However, everything changes because what he thought he had planned changes, as all plans in life do. Everything changes when Jim Hammond, the original Human Torch, makes his first hot steps in New York City. And not too long after that, Namor the Submariner makes a big splash. See what I did there? Big splash in New York as well. And so instead of chasing the war effort, becoming a war photographer, going to Europe like he originally planned, oh no, Phil sees a whole lot of action in New York and decides he's gonna stay here and follow the Marvels, as he calls them. Yeah, that's how we got the name. Yeah, the Marvels. So that's what Phil's going to do. However, we follow Phil's career over a couple of decades. We see him in the 40s. We see him in not the 50s, because not a lot happened in comic books in the 50s. We kind of skip past that. Let's skip past that. So we're going to skip past that. Let's skip past that. The 60s. And we're getting the late 60s too. Not really quite the 70s, but like the late 60s. And Phil is up close and personal for the biggest moments. Not just Submariner and Human Torch battling it out in New York City, as I mentioned before, but he's there for Galactus. He's there for the Fantastic Four wedding. He's there for Gwen Stacy, and we see Phil change. We see how the heroes change. We see how the city changes, and maybe most importantly, we see how news coverage changes. And that's part of the reason why it's so important today, because well, this is predating cable and predating internet and 24-hour news cycles, and yet as I reread Marvels for the first time probably since it came out, it still felt so true to what we go through now. So let's talk about the heroes. Let's just get them out of the way. Not that they're not important, but they kind of serve as a backdrop, because the story of Marvels is not really about the heroes themselves, it's about the people. And one of the people is of course Phil, but he's analyzing not just the heroes, but the people around them, and the heroes are actually the catalyst that sparks the change of the people. Woo! Side note, I was trying to remember the word catalyst, and I just got it. I'm glad I didn't screw that up. You didn't need to know that, but I'm telling you. Anyway, we're looking at how heroes are the catalyst that sparks change, and heroes are also a metaphor for many things, different things throughout the decades. In the 40s, the heroes represent weapons of mass destruction, war, and also change. Change is coming. These heroes, Human Torch and Submariner, the earliest ones that we see, and then later on, Captain America, Vision, not the Vision that we know that was played by Paul Bettany in the MCU, the original Vision, Angel, not the X-Men Angel, the original Marvel Angel. You're just gonna have to wiki that. But these heroes, they are new. They are an introduction to society that New York and the rest of the world has not seen before. And so we have every reason to look and stare and marvel at them. But they also are scary. as change comes. You know, we look at the original Human Torch, and he's this beast. He's a monster. He's actually an android, but still, the people don't know that. He's just this flaming thing that's melting cars as he also stops crime. And now we have to maybe change our feelings about the way he is. He's a crime fighter, but he's also this fire thing. But then he's also going in huge battles with the Submariner that affects the infrastructure around us. And now the people realize that they are small. You know, they felt immortal. They felt like, you know, we're here. You got the American dream. We're going to make things happen. We're going over to Europe. We're fighting the Nazis. We feel so big. And then here are these Marvels. And now we have to adapt to this. What does this mean? And as change comes, you have to adapt with it. And so heroes in the 40s section of this comic, they are change, and they are everything that people fear. And well, you know what? Change sometimes is enough. People fear change, but we're also looking at nuclear bombs at that time. We're looking at tanks and major weaponry that was never used before, and people had to adapt to it in the 40s because now it is part of our reality. And in the world of Marvels, superheroes are part of their reality. In issue 2, we're looking at the 60s, or at least the beginning of the 60s, and the heroes in the backdrop here are the X-Men. We know that they represent racial tension in the time when they were first introduced, representing the underrepresented. In Marvels, I would say that they represent the other in general, though we still see a lot of that racial conflict that's going on in the 60s. We see it in Alex Ross's art. We see Die Mutant Die and all sorts of anti-mutant propaganda being represented on walls, graffiti, something that's still relevant today. We still see that sort of racial tension. We still see swastikas on the wall. It seems like every day I look in the news, we're seeing this kind of fear towards the other, whether it be Mexicans coming across the border, or people that are working just around us, whether it be Islamophobia. It seems that the fear of the other still exists today. And it's something that makes Marvels very relevant even now as I'm reading it. Everything looks, unfortunately, a little too familiar. But it's not just a racial other that's being represented, it's an ideological other that's being represented. And we see a little bit towards the end of the issue where at some point Phil is reassuring his daughter that everything's gonna be okay as they worry about a mutant little girl that they had come across who had, well, was hiding in Phil's house, but then had run away because she was afraid that the terror that was coming to her might affect them and their household, and heaven forbid anything happens to their house where she was staying there. And so his daughter needed reassurance, and while that was happening, in the background, there was this kind of fixed TV moment of Iron Man versus their communist their communist counterpart over in Soviet Russia, the Titanium Man, and it was really, it seems out of place, but it was very intentionally placed there because communism is another ideology that it seems that we're in fear of, and we still see that fear now. Heaven forbid you have a liberal point of view with some social, I would say, you know, some socialist feelings. We're very quick to throw the communist label at you, and whether you are or aren't, I don't care, that's not my business. But the quickness to go and throw that label, the fear that comes to mind when you have a different ideology, that seems to be what's being represented in issue 2 of Marvels. Issue 3, the heroes kind of represent our systems failing us. Everything from our news people to our politicians to the celebrities that we love so much. Yes, that's who they represent. And we see that when we look at Stark Industries. And the people may be growing a little more cynical. Maybe they're tired of their buildings falling down, but they are looking at Tony Stark and Stark Industries and Iron Man and really just analyzing him, his place in America. We've seen it in the movies, we've seen it in the comics. It was nice seeing that represented in Marvels. We see that when we look at the wedding of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman. It's not just a marriage. You see some people gossiping that maybe the Invisible Woman has a little thing on the side with the Submariner. she's almost like a celebrity that we just gossip about. Like, I mean, I don't know if the Invisible Woman's ever been compared to like Cardi B or something, but yes, that's the way we're talking about this kind of celebrity fanfare and like little sordid secrets and so dirty and filthy. We even see a small analysis, didn't really deep dive into it. We get a little cameo from Peter Parker because once again, Phil Sheldon is a news photographer. And so he's gonna cross paths with Peter Parker. And Peter Parker, of course, works with the Bugle and he takes pictures of Spider-Man, which we know, he is. But as he's taking these photos, J. Jonah Jameson is publishing these photos and trying to prove that he's a menace. And I want these photos of Spider-Man and I want them on my desk now. And it's the sort of thing where Phil, who really idolizes or looks up to, I'm not sure the best word to say it, but he admires is probably a better word. He admires these heroes and he sees them as heroes and really is disgusted that Peter Parker is selling these pictures of Spider-Man to make Spider-Man look bad, not knowing that he is Spider-Man, but he thinks that it's really slimy journalism. And he really feels like the way that we're attacking these heroes is maybe a little slimy as well, because he sees them as heroes. And it's very interesting. You can say that they can represent politicians and, you like politicians, or if you have a certain politician you like. I feel that maybe Phil stands by the heroes a little too closely, because I'll be honest with you, if Nova crashed into my building, I'm gonna have some feelings about Nova, all right? And so I don't completely share the perspective. Like, I get why you stop Thanos, I owe my life to you, I get it. But at the same time, I'm gonna be a little cynical too, and I'm gonna have opinions, I'm just human. But now we're seeing a little evolution of Phil, because as close as he is, he's slowly starting to feel like he's part of it. He's no longer an outsider just snapping pictures, he's in it. And now he's looking at all of us. The heroes here are the representation of the things that we idolize and the things that fail us, and we feel they failed us, and because that's what they represent, we're also seeing a little bit of self-reflection here. We're looking at us, and this has been a common thing in all of the other issues, how we have responded to just all of the mess around us. Let's get to number 4. And in issue 4, it kind of is almost like everything that we've seen so far, because it's continuing the systems that fail us, but this time we see it through the eyes of Phil, while Peter Parker fails to save Gwen Stacy, or should I say Spider-Man fails to save Gwen Stacy. We always think of the heroes as, he's the hero, he's gonna get the job done, as they always do. Here comes Galactus, but the heroes, they got this. The Fantastic Four, they've got it. And now we see a moment in time in Marvel where the hero fails, and that's very new. It was very new in comics then, and it was new to the eyes of Phil. And so now if this is your first time reading it, it's new to us. And it was crazy. It was those systems that were failing, and now they've actually failed. And it was something that broke apart and tore apart Phil as someone on the outside, and as I mentioned, starting to go in. But something that he needed to realize also was that everything's changing. That goes back to issue 1, because now there's more heroes. As we go on, it's crazy, because 70s more heroes, 80s more heroes. I would say even now, it's not that there's more heroes, although there are still more heroes. We've got more comic book publishers, we have more movies, we have more cartoons, more channels. Superheroes seem to be everywhere now. There's no stopping that. This is part of life. Again, why when I read Marvel's again, it really hit me like, oh, it still feels that way today. Less with the more heroes and more with the maybe more mediums that we can see these heroes. It does feel like superheroes everywhere. Ask any of your friends that don't watch Marvel movies or superhero movies, because we all know we have them. They're very eager to say it on social media. It's like, I've never seen any of them. Oh, these superhero movies. But that's basically what it is. It's even now, it feels like superheroes are all around us, and that's the way it is by the end of Marvel's. It is, they are everywhere. And Phil is realizing this, and I thought it was really cute that in the ending, I gave the spoiler warning already, but in the very ending, as Phil retires, he just wants to take a picture of his retirement, and he has his assistant take the picture, and it's him and his wife and just a random boy, just a little boy. It was his paper boy, just throwing papers at his desk. I don't know what that action was, but he's throwing the papers at his front door, and he thinks he's taking a picture with a normal boy, but the boy on the bike who's throwing the paper is Danny Ketch, who we know, maybe didn't know. I don't know if you know, but Danny Ketch becomes Ghost Rider. From Paperboy to Ghost Rider. I think that was like a little funny thing that they did there. But even that ending, it goes, he thinks he's taking a picture with a normal boy, but it's just another superhero in the end. He doesn't know that. And I thought that was a really cool ending. And that's it for the people and the superheroes. But there's one other thing that I think needs to be addressed, and that is news. News as a medium is something that's covered a lot in this story. We see Phil, he himself is a photojournalist, but we don't just see his perspective as the newspaper person. He's still a civilian, and other times we get to see other civilians taking in the news as they did in the respective time that we are observing. So when we're looking at the 40s, we sometimes get news bulletins when they go to the movie theater. Sometimes we get news bulletins via radio, and we're seeing news headlines as paper boys are handing out their papers. Looking at you, Danny Ketch. But it's something that's worth observing, because as we look at the news and how news is covered in the comic, we're seeing a lot of changes. And it relates very much to how news has changed today. Unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to see Phil's response to cable news or a 24-hour news cycle or social media news. We're not going to get fake news, but we're not going to get any of that perspective. But everything still feels familiar, even though we stop at the late 60s, because when we have news that, let's say, is gone awry, news that may be wrong, let's say we attack the Avengers, and they're not actually the heroes, but it's actually a plan by the Skrulls or something to turn us against our heroes, and there's no real apology. It seems like we just print the next news, like, oh, it turns out they're okay, and that's it. There's a lack of accountability for news media, and that's something that we still see today. There's a lack of accountability on news, the people that we trust to tell the news, the platforms that we receive our news from. We do get fake news, and sometimes that fake news gets channeled into the real news. There's competition from news outlets, and we don't really know who to trust, because liberal media has their agenda and conservative news has their agenda, and we just can't seem to find someone who can just tell us the news. We see that in the comic as well. We don't just see newspapers and news bulletins. At one point we see an advertisement saying Spider-Man Menace on a news van. Is being advertised that Spider-Man is a menace, that we're covering this, like this is our point of view, this is what our forum is going to be about. We are going to just watch Spider-Man and take him down. It is very telling of this old school news photojournalist and how he looks at how news has changed around him. And I see that myself when we see our newscasters who tell lies about when they were fired upon from their helicopter. This is the kind of thing that it hurts the people that we watch, and it's the kind of thing that hurts the credibility of Phil himself as a newsman when he sees other news people and other news mediums and magazines and newspapers just seem to be reaching for the headline and not just giving us the story and being upfront and factual. It's all sensationalism. It was very interesting seeing the news and how people responded to the news, how people very quick to turn on the heroes and not really give so much an apology as much as maybe they'll buy a book or a magazine or an action figure. That's their apology. There's no real acknowledgement that I made a mistake. And we still see that today. We may shun a celebrity one moment and then give them a like or a follow the next moment. There's no real accountability for the opinions we hold because there's so much going on that no one's really gonna, put us to the pavement and be accountable for them. How can I be accountable if no one's gonna make me accountable? And it's a very real, very interesting look from the perspective of what I thought was a superhero comic. And as I looked at Marvel's, once again, 25th anniversary, it was just so real that something that came out in 1994 seems so relevant even right now. So that's it. That's Marvel's. And if, we just take the time to look at that Marvel's annotated and maybe look at every Easter egg, because it's not just what I've mentioned. There's a lot of heroes that are here. We see Luke Cage for a couple seconds. We see Black Panther photos. We see both big moments in Marvel represented and like little just kind of like little shout outs. We don't spend a lot of time on the Kree vs. Skrull War because that happens in outer space and Phil's not in outer space. But we get to see all these Marvel moments represented. So important because as Marvel continues to change and evolve and heroes get revamped and stories get retold, it's nice to go back and see something that's kind of represented in real time and remember why these heroes are important in the first place. I highly recommend that you read Marvel's, and then if you've already read Marvel's, check out the epilogue when it comes out. I know I've already mentioned that I'm excited for it, so I do suggest that you do that. And then when you're done, let me know what you think. If you've already read it, let me know if you agree with what I said. Let's keep this conversation going. Comment below, share this video, tell your friends, like the page, follow us at Comic Convo on Twitter. That's COMICONVO, boom! And you can like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the channel, and come on, keep the conversation going. I promise I'll respond to. I will respond to you. Thank you so much for watching. This is Brandon for Comic Convo, signing out.